can state your name and where you are from.
Yes, I'm Chester L. Locke, L-O-C-K-E, and I live at 692 Main Street, Lancaster, Massachusetts. I've been here since 1929.
All right,
Same house.
Mr. Locke, why did you join the service, or were you drafted?
I was drafted through the selective service system.
How old were you?
18.
What were you doing before you joined the service?
School, high school. We're just about to graduate. In fact, we graduated before I went in the service.
Where did you go to high school?
Right across the street here at the one and only building
Oh, really?
serviced from grade 1 right up through high school, grade 12.
Oh, boy.
And the building is still there. It's a historic building now.
Do they still have school over there?
What's that?
Do they still have school over there?
No, they've discontinued schooling there some few years ago.
I hear you.
But they did use it right up till, not too long ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago.
What branch of the service were you in?
I was in the U.S. Navy, and I was in the reserves.
How did your parents feel about you joining the service?
My father had died in 1933, and my mother, of course, was here, and like every mother at that time, all their sons and some of their daughters were heading into the service for World War II, either through the selective service or on their own.
How did you feel about joining the service?
I had no choice. I got the draft notice, and when Uncle Sam says come, you come, no matter what.
Well, you were working at Fort Devon.
Oh, well, I was just working a little bit after the graduation, yes, just to fill in time.
How long about after graduation were you drafted?
Let me see now. I graduated in 42, June, and I was drafted in, I guess, about April of 43. So I had almost a year's time from graduation.
And where did you do your basic training?
At Newport, Rhode Island.
What was that like?
Well, so where they usually start off with trainees, like Fort Devon's for the Army, and this was for the Navy. And that was just one place. They had one out in Norfolk, Virginia, and then they had one out west somewhere. But mine was right, what did I say, in
Rhode Island?
Newport, Rhode Island. So that wasn't too far for me to go. I spent 3 weeks there, that's all.
I see. Was there a culture shock on your part meeting people from all over the country, or was it just people from around here?
No, just very interesting. Just interesting to meet all the different fellows I met a lot from the West, a lot from New York, New Jersey. They were the weird ones. They had the weird accents, and they were rough, but the guys from the Middle West and West, they were real good, more like the kind that I wanted to be.
Yeah?
They weren't awfully rough or with their voice or their talk. They were nice guys. I got to know quite a few of them.
Do you have any interesting stories from basic training?
Well, the only thing I can remember, I think for the most part from my basic training was just getting the various shots, and sometimes 2 or 3 shots at one time, and your arms would ache and be so sore, you'd have to do a lot of washing to help keep the muscles and the fluids going through your system, and that was what was advised us to do, was to do a lot of exercising. And if you laid down and rested because it was aching, it got worse. So I did the other, and I did very well.
That's good. What was your military occupational specialty?
Yeoman, which in normal terms means like a scribe, and it's in scribe or secretariat type of thing. Like the storekeepers would be one branch, and I was in the yeoman, which is the scribe area.
Gotcha. That's interesting. And what zone of combat did you see action, if you did see any?
Yes, basically my combat was in the Solomon Islands. That's the British Solomon Islands, and the famous Guadalcanal and Bougainville. Although on Guadalcanal I didn't get there till about a year after the fighting had pretty well ceased, and all that was left was Japanese up in the hills, which attempted at times to try to filter down and cause trouble, but for the most part the Marines and Army held them back.
I
See,
see.
we were just a Navy part of the whole situation, which was unusual because normally you think of the Navy guys being on a ship,
Mm.
but in my case we were in an outfit called Acorns, and we were land-based. So we went and we stayed on the land because we were helping the airfields and so forth. And I think we were kind of nicknamed the Aviation Construction Ordnance Repair Navy. And that's how we got Acorn out of it, although that's not officially established that way. And we were 13, so I had a nice number to contend with. But it didn't bother me because there was 13 of us that went across the country in the plane a train after we'd finished our indoctrination at Fort Devens. And we were shipped off to, I was on a 13 shipped off to the Pacific coast, ready to head out to the Pacific.
How was your relationship with those 13?
Wonderful. Some I already knew. One was another fellow right from Lancaster. And then the rest, oh no, wait a minute, I take that back. He was with me during the service, but he wasn't part of the trip to California because he got assigned to somewhere else. You can back that out. No, they were, they were just, I think they pretty much came from all little different parts of New England, New York, New Jersey, as I said, and probably Vermont, and some of us from Massachusetts. And the little group I was in consisted of 13, which we then joined the official outfit, which was called Acorn 13 out in
What was it like over
California.
there?
What was that?
What was it like over there?
Over there in the jungle?
Yeah.
I've got some pictures you can look at later if you'd like. But it was just jungle until we and the Seabees knocked down a bunch of big palm trees and cleared the area and made a little camp. A lot of trees we didn't cut down because we wanted it for shade and cover, because the Japanese would fly over, they'd see all the buildings, so if they're covered by the palm trees they couldn't see as well. And we had a nice camp after a while, but when we first landed it was miserable because we had just our bags and had to lay on the ground, and then we had a big rainstorm come that very day we landed at Guadalcanal, and we had to keep moving our gear and everything back further inland. So we was practically right into the jungle finally, and even the water was creeping up on the floor in our tents, and we'd sit there and watch how much further is it going to come. Finally subsided.
That's good. Which theater of combat would you have preferred to serve, Europe or the Pacific?
Didn't make any difference because I was just inducted and off I went to the South Pacific area.
So wherever you were told to go,
Yep.
you were happy with.
That's right. Well, I just took it as a matter of course.
Did you think one was more important than the other?
No.
Did you have to conjure hatred of Germans or Japanese, or did the hate come naturally, or was there any?
No, we did. We had the hatred for the Japanese, of course, because they were our enemies, and they were doing a lot of killing of our, American guys, and it was a terrible slaughter, and we just hated them.
Do you think the war in the Pacific was a racist war on both sides?
No, I don't think so. I mean, from my understanding of the whole situation, it was because of Hitler. Hitler and his wanting to dominate Europe, and he happened to be able to bring in Japan and some of the other countries, Italy mainly, and that was the war we were fighting, just for freedom, because Hitler was just, as you know from history, was just killing off Jews in particularly, and it's amazing we didn't do more to stop that, but eventually we did. I'm speaking of the United States. But it was, I think it was strictly, in a way, racist because of Hitler and his racism. Because he hated the Jews and was exterminating them. By the, 6 million of them he managed to slaughter through those camps that they gassed them and so forth. So we were just fighting the so-called Axis powers, which was Japan and Germany, Nazi, and some other countries associated with Germany, and of course Italy.
That you didn't have any combat experience?
Not really, no. I wasn't trained to be a combatant, although I was trained in the use of my rifle. I always had that with me in the jungle.
Yeah.
Nice little carbine that was readily available if in case I did have to.
Did you ever have to use it?
No, I didn't have to. We almost did at one time because the word came into the camp that the Japanese had broken through the lines up in the hills and were headed down to the beach. And that's where we were, was on the beach camped. And so everybody had to be prepared for the onslaught if it came, and of course they'd push us right into the sea if they had the chance. But they never got that far down. The good old Marines came to the rescue every time. They held them back, and the Army had a lot to help with it too. But the Marines were the basic ones we really cherished and thought a lot of.
Do you have any stories from people you have may have known that did enter combat?
Not really, because I knew a lot of them after the war, but they passed away since. But they're just their own personal stories, and they had a lot of bad combat situations and so forth. And her own brother was in the Army in Europe, saw an awful lot. But for myself, I was just, as I say, stuck in the jungles and carried on my life as a scribe, and I was just personal yeoman to the commanding officers. Every time we had a new commanding officer, I'd automatically be his scribe or secretary or yeoman, and I would take notes and everything for his.
Oh, really?
You know.
That's interesting.
And then I had to go type them up. See, that's why I was in that sort of thing, because in school I'd taken typing and a commercial course, which included typing and business, bookkeeping, things like that.
So you had a little specialty?
Yeah, so mine was a specialty, and that's why I was put in as a yeoman right off. When I went right from boot camp, I was yeoman 3rd class already.
Oh, wow.
So that was quite a step, because later on in the Navy it took a couple of years or more just to be apprentice seaman. You'd stay apprentice seaman for about 2 or 3 years before you even got a rank.
How many classes are there? You said you were in the 3rd.
Yes, well, it is. It goes from apprentice seaman, then there's the yeoman 3rd class, then 2nd class, then 1st class, and then to chief. Then it goes into warrant officer, and then from there it starts going into your commanders and lieutenant commanders and captains and so on for the Navy. And its equivalency is with the Army. They're different ranks of sergeants and so forth. But I don't know much about them at all.
I see. Do you feel that your superior officers were trustworthy, knowledgeable, and inspiring?
For the most part, yes. We had some wonderful officers, and we had some wonderful commanding officers. The very first one we had that took us out to California was a retired naval captain or commander, but he was recalled to service, and he was quite old. And he wasn't a very happy gentleman, and I think he drank quite a bit. But then he was just assigned for a short period of time anyway. And then when we got over to the islands, we were under other commands. And I always, well, of course I worked with him, so I think my favorite was one right from Connecticut. And his name was E.G. Mason. And he was a wonderful man, a wonderful commander, and wonderful leader of our Acorn 13, and I really appreciated working with him. He was very good. In fact, he's the one that took me for a plane ride back from Bougainville to Guadalcanal, because he had to take a flight, and he flew, and he took the plane and asked me to go with him. So I had the opportunity to fly back to Guadalcanal and revisit my old campground. But at the same time, while I was there, I met a boy from Lancaster.
Boy.
Can you imagine that over 3,000 or 6,000 miles away from home? And there was this Buddy Connors who was he was in the 3rd Marines, and they were just leaving for, I think it was it Guam? I forget exactly which island. But he was killed as soon as he got on the island. So I'd had a chance to talk with him and chat with him, and he even had a chance to write back to Lancaster in a letter to one of his former teachers, who then published it in the newspaper, and it told about his meeting with me and chatting with me and so forth.
Oh, wow.
And then unfortunately, the next thing I knew, I was in, I was on Bougainville, back again, and I heard he had been killed. Through my mother. She would write letters to me.
That's too bad.
Yeah, his name was Buddy Connors, Hugh F. Connors, and his plaque is in the town hall.
Oh, really?
Picture of a very young, nice-looking kid. He wasn't even 18, I don't think.
Oh, wow.
He happened to get in under the age. I think he was 17, but he wanted always to be in the Marines, and we were talking about things. When we were 16, 17, see, the war came on in 41, and how old I was, 17 then. So we'd talk about the war, of course, and we'd say, well, which part of the service would you like to be in? And he said he wanted to be in the Marines, and I said, well, I don't think I want to be in the Marines, and I didn't want to be in the Army. I said, I kind of like the idea of being in the Navy.
Why didn't you want to be in the other two?
Well, I thought the Marines would probably be too much for my kind of build and character, and the Army, I just thought that was too many guys going in the Army. But the Navy sounded good to me, and I wanted to be on a ship, maybe sail on the waters.
Yeah.
I got my wish of being in the Navy, but not to be on a ship. I never was on a ship. Even when I went during the Korean War, I was still up in North Africa at a place called Port Laiudi in North Africa, and served time there while the Korean War was going on.
So you didn't get a chance to be on a ship at all?
No, just to be carried across the ocean.
Oh, boy.
And so I laugh about that. I said, here I was, a fellow that kind of wanted to be in the Navy. I wasn't over enthusiastic about the whole situation, but that seemed to be my preference.
Yeah.
And I thought, sure, I'd been inducted into the Navy. I said, oh boy, I was ready to be getting on a ship someplace. And ended up in the Acorn, and they were just a land-based unit that helped to serve both the Army and the Navy or the Marines, whatever happened to want the use of us.
Gotcha.
But not combat. We weren't a combat unit.
I see.
We were a service unit.
Did you ever refuse to obey any orders?
Only one. And that was a night when I was on Bougainville. I was in my tent. We had screens, of course, around the tent because we had to keep out all the bad scorpions and bugs and spiders and so forth. And some of those spiders out there were big as a $50 with legs stretching way out. Of course, maybe they seemed bigger to me at the time. But I was a centipede. I could see this centipede crawling across the top of my netting as I could look through my tent into the sky. Everything was dark. We had no lights on. But the moon and light from the sky came through the little entrance to our tent, and my cot was so I could look out through, and here was this centipede about that long crawling across my netting. The big question to me was it inside my tenting or was it outside? And I didn't want to have it drop inside because it could bite, and they're poisonous. Not deadly poisonous, but they could be. But they do paralyze your body to some degree. You know, centipedes are bad. We had one boy was bitten once, and he couldn't move his whole leg. They had to carry him off in a stretcher, and this was when he was in the jungle. But I put my little light on, little flashlight, so I could see whether it was on inside and make sure I could get him out. I didn't want to drop in my clothing, you know. And just as I did that, the officer of the watch saw the light. He came over to my tent and he told me to put that light out. And I said, I'm just trying to find this big scorpion that's, not scorpion, centipede that was in my tent. Did I say scorpion before?
No.
No, centipede. And he said, I told you to put that light out. And I said, I just want to get, and he says, you put that light out now or you're going to go with me on report. So I had turned the light out. Not knowing whether that centipede was in my tent, in my netting,
oh my,
or outside. Must have been outside. But the rest of the night was all I could do to sleep, of course, on account of it. I kept thinking there was something crawling around.
Oh, that's...
But that was just one incident always sticks in my mind because of that one evening of just, that was all. It wasn't anything real serious in a way. But it was just that guy was adamant about me not, and I thought it was stupid of him to just allow me just a few minutes time to see. But he was one of those real gung-ho new lieutenants. And he was about the only person that I didn't get along with too well anyway. I don't think many others did either.
No?
But he happened to be the night watchman for in this particular night in my case, so I was the one that got stuck and have a memory of it now.
How long was he with you?
Pretty much, I think he was with us all quite a while. He stayed in the outfit with us for a long time, so he wasn't that bad, you know. I think he was involved with the storekeepers. He was one that helped the storekeeping, which would be provisions that would be supplying provisions for our outfit and so on.
I see. Did you have any contact with SS troops?
None whatsoever, because that would be in Europe, I believe.
Gotcha. And have you ever seen Band of Brothers or heard about that?
Yes, and I think I saw that. It's a DVD, isn't it? Or,
Yeah, it was on HBO, and it is a
Yeah.
DVD too.
and I think I got it from the library. Still in the library, Band of Brothers.
Did you ever? Were there any misconceptions?
No, because this was all about the army, I believe, and the European fighting, which is so much different from where I was, what I had to go through with the jungle and Japanese and bombing air raids and things like that.
And how would you sum up the efforts of Allies in World War II?
As far as I can see, it was a very unusual cooperative thing, and I think it was all basically because of Eisenhower. He just was one of those persons that was able to coordinate all the forces and finally made it possible for us to win.
What about your own efforts?
How do you mean that? My efforts to the whole situation?
Your efforts and your group,
We were just still a service unit, just serving on an airfield or more or less wherever we happened to be. And we'd just take care of some of our members were mechanics, airplane mechanics, so they could help out fixing up some of the airplanes that came in.
And did you carry any animosity towards old adversaries?
No, I don't. I guess I'm one that never was one to do that very much. Although, you know, I don't hate the Japanese anymore today. I think they turned out to be quite the people, and that was due to Douglas MacArthur. If it hadn't been for Douglas MacArthur, we don't know what Japan would be like today, but he really got them started on a road to democracy, and that's what's been going ever since, way back when he was commander in Japan. But of course, I'll never have a Japanese car. I had four of those.
What do you have now?
Good old Ford.
I like
Ford
it.
Taurus.
I like it.
I've always had Fords ever since I was a young kid. I even had a Lincoln Zephyr when she and I were courting, a big Lincoln Zephyr V12, which was made by the Ford Motor Company with their Lincoln division.
I'm the same way.
And I had a Mercury, and I still have a Mercury in my garage. It's a 1962. And I know your grandfather, Phil Carlisle.
Yep.
He knows all about it.
Oh, yeah. Right. Well, Mr. Locke, I thank you very much for answering all that questions. Is there anything else that you could think of to tell me about your experience? Training, the war, anything else?
No, there's millions of things, but they're just little things, like the first day we had Thanksgiving and had a turkey, or the first day we had real eggs instead of powdered eggs. Things like that were momentous.
Yeah.
At the time, we just had powdered eggs, and we'd have them for breakfast, you know, and finally a shipment of real eggs came in from Australia, because it's the British Solomon Islands, and we're not too far from Australia, New Zealand, that part of the area. And they brought in a whole load of fresh eggs. And the first thing we heard, the rumor was running through the camp. The guys were even running down the street, so-called, in our campground, saying, "They got fresh eggs for breakfast this morning." Boy, did we run to breakfast that morning.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, things like that were momentous. Or when we first would get landed and just have to dig a hole in the ground to live, until we got a nice campground going and got the tents up and wooden platforms, and then we had like a nice situation, but very, very uncomfortable to begin with, and oftentimes an awful lot of mud, because we had rainy seasons, and we'd have to get way back into the jungle kind of to get away from the mud.
Yeah.
And the little roadways that would go up through our campgrounds up into the Army and Marines and so forth. Sometimes the Jeeps were stuck where the wheels were way down, way up over the hubcaps trying to get through, and they had to be pulled out with tanks and other vehicles with big chains and so forth. But,
Are you gonna talk about the Korean?
no, I wasn't talking about that. I was just doing strictly World War II.
Oh, strictly, no.
Yeah, I was just at, I was gone for about 3 years, I guess, and a lot of it was in the jungle area between Guadalcanal and Bougainville. Then we went back to a place called Russell Islands, which was still part of the Solomon Group, for rest and relaxation, R&R. And then we were shipped back to the United States.
What was that R&R like?
Well, it was mainly a place to, we could swim on our own. There was no combatant units anywhere around. We were way away from all kind of Japanese or any kind of fighting. And it was a beautiful, typical jungle paradise,
Oh,
you
wow.
see in the papers in Hawaii and all that with the big palm trees overhead, beautiful beach that we could swim. And then, of course, we had our chance to eat well and have lots of beer and so on. Was there anything spectacular that I've talked to you about? Is there anything spectacular I've ever mentioned to you about World War II when I was in Guadalcanal, Bougainville?
Well, he was always quiet about those things, so I never found
I
out.
had one sad incident.
Mm.
That was when I was on Bougainville, and I was in my little, as I say, I was a scribe for the commanding officer, and while my camp and most of our camp was way up into the jungle area, I was down on the beach, special little place built where I had my own tent, my own underground place to go in case we were bombed, and it was part of the commanding officer's place too if he was down there. And I would be there with the telephones to be able to notify him when certain planes come in or whatever would need to be done. And so I was always there when planes took off in the morning. In fact, I'll show you the picture of that area that I'm talking about. My daughter Ruth made up this collage.
Oh, wow.
And fortunately for me, I drew this, and I've got a date up here, you can't see it maybe, but it's in 1944. And this is where I was, see where I said I'm located right here in the tent?
Mm-hmm.
And, or wait a minute, was it over here? I was located on the tent. I get my glasses on here, see what I'm
Oh,
doing.
wow, these pictures are amazing.
That was the operations office, and that was the field dispatch. And Commander Mason, see, remember I told him?
Mhm.
He had to be the commander, then rushing to air ops to see me. And I was in this, I used to have a mark here where I was, I thought. I think it was just from here, because I was right between the fighter strip and the water. This is the ocean, Empress Augustus Bay. And this was the tower, and the planes would take off through here. Well, one day, one little plane like this was coming off this way, and for some reason it couldn't maneuver properly. No, that's where I was, up in here. I thought so. And see, I was so close to that, he got off to the right too much, and his wing went right through my ropes on my tent. And the first thing I know, of course, I was asleep, because it was like 4 o'clock in the morning when they made their trips to Rabaul to knock out Japanese airstrips. And his plane hit my ropes, knocked the ropes off my tent, so my tent collapsed onto me. And I had no idea what was happening, because all of a sudden I'd been asleep. And then I heard this, like a boom, and then I heard people shouting and running. When I had to crawl out of my bunk onto the ground and under the tent to get out.
Oh, boy.
Then I could see the big blaze, and the plane had, because of its being hit with the wings here, further tipped it to the right, and so it's plowed into the ground. At the same time, there was 2 guys sleeping here in a little dugout kind of place, and they were immediately killed, and the pilot was killed and was still in the plane burning. I got out, and of course I could see him in the cockpit. By that time it was too late. And the 2 guys here were burnt to crisps. I'll never forget them.
Oh.
One had raised his arm up like this last minute. Saw what was coming, it was too late. So that was a sad thing to me. I didn't know any of them, but it was just a sad happening to do that. And the only other time we had that Mountain Torquina, which we were based on, was an ancient volcano. And every once in a while there'd be earthquakes. Yeah, that's it. And that would rumble and shake the ground. We'd have earthquakes. And we had quite a quake one day, and it shook this tower, so it was swinging back and forth almost like this. And the ground was going up and down.
Oh boy.
And I ran from my tent to get in here where there was underground barracks.
Yeah.
Big logs and everything covering it over. And we said, well, maybe we shouldn't go in there, because what if that crumbles in? We'd be buried alive.
Yeah.
So we stayed out, and then all of a sudden it stopped. But the guy, there was one guy up in the tower, and it was being shaken back and forth, so he decided to get out of there. As he started coming down, he was almost thrown right off the tower.
Oh,
He
my.
hung on to the sides and got back in and got down. But those are all little incidents that occur, you know. But those are the airplanes that we came to tend to. And at the time, I had this mark so that it was all secret. I couldn't send this home or anything like that. It would be all confiscated. So I kept it, and I brought it home, and is that a colored one? I have one that's colored.
That's not colored, no.
No, so this is just a
That's shaded.
copy of it. In fact, I think this is original. I think I did a copy of it and colored them a bit. But this is a sample of our jungle background, you see.
Yeah.
We happened to go on a little fishing trip one day. We did have time for a little recreation when we was stationed on the island. Everything was pretty well cleared up. And this was a missionary camp in here. That was, I forget what missionary it was, but the natives were learning to be Christians. So they were good and friendly. And there's our group again. This was the kind of tent we lived in.
Oh, wow.
About usually 4 to 5 guys would have bunks in here.
And the one above that's that volcano?
Yep, that's that volcano again, Mount Torquina. And this is me, as I say, as a scribe in the office that we finally built eventually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we got, we tried to make everything as...
What's this picture, this one?
Oh, that's the group, my our yeoman group, plus that's the Commander Mason.
Oh.
And then this was Lieutenant Commander here. No, he was the commander, Commander Mason. That was his lieutenant commander. And this was another one, some high lieutenant. And then this was us in the background, some of my buddies. And there's me. I was always in the middle because I was always about the tallest. And this was our chief yeoman. And I was yeoman first class at the time. Next step was to be chief. But I never made it.
No?
And this is the way I looked. I think I came home because that looks like I was at the side of the house. I must have been home on leave. So my daughter put this together, and I think
That's really nice.
it was pretty nice to have that done. I have loads of pictures, but I didn't bring many down. And over here, that's just a picture of me when I was first inducted.
Those are very interesting.
And this was just a little placard that I got eventually from 1942 to 44. Basically the dates out, because I was 43 to 45, I think. But South Pacific, written up by Admiral Halsey. Perhaps you've heard of his name, but a lot of you folks wouldn't know of him today. Very famous admiral, Acorn 13.
That's awesome.
Showed I served, and they presented this plaque.
It's very nice.
Yeah, so my daughter went to the trouble of putting this in the frame, too. Well, I guess...
Those are some great stories.
Yeah, there's bridges of things, as I say, but a lot of it's just little odds and ends of day-to-day things that went on. But those are a couple of things that stick out.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for sharing them with me.
Well, you're welcome.
And how did you meet my grandfather?
Oh, ever since we were young kids. Phil used to go to your folks' home when he was
Who?
Phil Carlisle.
Oh, yes.
He was
Phil.
about 17, wasn't he, when he went to your
Yeah.
five?
Yeah. Oh,
He
was
lived
nice
he had a big
boy.
family, I believe, in Worcester.
He was the best.
And he was a kid that came out this way, and I don't know how he got associated with it. Did he just,
Well,
Who
Dad knew him, and Dad was the one that invited Phil.
oh, well, how did he happen to know Phil? Where did Phil sort of meet up with your father? Have any idea?
I don't know.
Or what, I think, didn't Phil sort of meet him because of our young people's group?
Maybe that's it.
Somehow Phil got wind of
Yeah.
our young people's group in the church, and he came, and of course, all the girls were after him, and he was chasing the girls too. And we were all there too. We weren't chasing each other then. It was later years for us. But he was such a
Yeah.
good-looking fellow, and all the girls were shining up to him, of course. But we had a wonderful youth group,
That's funny.
and we'd go places together, and it was all up on above board. Nice, clean things that we did. And then he got so he knew the family, and she comes from a family of 12.
Oh boy.
So they had a big family, and there was 4 of the boys and 8 girls.
Mm.
And a lot of the girls were real young, like Priscilla and Margie and Sylvia and
Oh, they
You,
all knew
Ruth,
Phil.
we were all
We
right around the
liked
same
him
age.
so much.
And the only older ones you had was your older sister Ollie and Jean, and they were out of our group
Yeah,
because they were too
They
old.
were
But
nice.
the others were pretty much all within range of one another. So, and then they had she had 4 brothers, and she has 2 of the brothers still living. One is Frank Collins that lives in Clinton, and Phil knows him as well as he knows me, and of course knows Connie as well as anybody. And the younger brother Ted that lives up in New Hampshire, and she still has about 3 sisters left.
Hmm?
You've got 3 sisters,
Priscilla.
Priscilla, Margie, and yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, and Jeannie. So there's
Yeah.
4 girls left and 2 boys out of the 12.
Yeah. Half of
That's
us
funny.
are going.
But Phil just fit right in right off the bat with all of us, and he enjoyed our company. And I think he lived. I know he lived up with. That's right. He was living with John Foster. That's
Foster.
right.
Mm.
I think he kind of left his home. Did he ever mention about ever leaving home as a young
No,
kid?
Not to
Phil
me.
had a very difficult childhood.
Yeah.
I think he did that,
Got
and it was a
that.
big family, and I think he was either neglected or something, and I think he just left, and he ended up with this John Foster, and who took him in, and that's how, because of that, being in Lancaster, then he got to know the group, the church, and then from there on. So he's been a close friend of us all for years.
Yes. Well, thank you.
In fact, he was my oil man
Oh,
for
of
years
course,
while he
of
ran
course.
the oil company.
Of course.
And I was so sad he lost his only son.
Mm.
Oh, that was bad, because I knew
Yeah.
that boy. He was such a nice kid, too.
That was a hard time. but-
Yes, that was a very difficult time, I'm sure, and it was a very unusual thing, and I think had a lot to do with doctor's neglect. Did they ever mention that or anything?
Not really. I was too young
Yeah.
to.
To
But
know all these details of things.
yeah.
Yeah, well,
You know?
I wouldn't want to say much because I don't want to spread anything.
Mm.
But it was just a shame that he had that cancerous kind of growth and
Mm.
it killed him.
Mm.
He was such a good kid.
But definitely gave me a great recommendation. I really appreciate you
Yeah,
answering these questions that I had.
yeah, no,
Very interesting.
yeah, Phil and I used to